Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I never thought I would say this out loud in front of the whole world, but if I'm going to be honest about the biggest decision in my life, I need to start with the moment I felt a heat rise in my chest that I didn't recognize, the kind that makes your hands go still and your heartbeat get loud behind your ears. The kind that can turn a living room into a storm with one sentence. My mom asked a question to the woman I love, and she asked it with the kind of calm that tells you she had rehearsed it in her head, maybe for weeks, maybe for years. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a shout, it was simple and sharp and precise, and it cut me because I knew it came from love and fear at the same time. She looked at her and said, "Are you ready to share him with millions for the rest of your life? And still tell the truth to his face when the spotlight is blinding?" I felt anger before I felt understanding, because to me it sounded like doubt dressed as wisdom, like a test my love didn't sign up to take. I wanted to jump in fast, like I do on stage when a beat drops, but I held my breath and remembered what I tell myself before every performance. Show up with your whole heart, not just your pride. I'm not married yet. I haven't set a date. I'm planning, I'm learning, I'm listening, and maybe that's why I'm speaking now. Because the question my mom asked her forced me to look at the kind of man I am becoming and the kind of love I'm building. I spent so much of my life proving I can go harder, sing higher, move sharper, and in the quiet hours after the lights go black, I practice something that people don't always see. Becoming the person I hope to be when no one is cheering. That's the real training. That's the character work. It's not a viral clip. It's the way you treat the staff member who hands you tea when you're tired. The way you answer your friend when they call at 2 a.m. The way you breathe through a misunderstanding when your mom asks a question that shakes your chest and you want to react. But you know, reaction is easy and response is the discipline. I learned that discipline from a long road with people who gave me their shoulders when I needed them most. Namjoon, who always knew how to turn a messy feeling into a clear sentence so I could see it. Seokjin, who could make me laugh in rooms that felt too heavy to breathe in. Yoongijungkook, who taught me that quiet is not weakness, it's a deeper kind of strength that lets you keep going when the world is loud. Hoseok, who keeps sunshine in places I didn't know had windows. Jimin, who knows my face like a mirror and can hear a lie in my voice even when I'm only lying to myself. Taehyung, who reminds me to be strange in the best way, to keep the color in life when routine wants to make everything gray. We didn't grow together because it was convenient. We grew together because we had to, because there was a promise inside our name that we were determined to protect, because a team like ours is not a room you walk into. It's a vow you renew quietly every day, even when no one is filming you. Army taught me another dimension of this. People say fans are always watching. That's true. But what blessed me is knowing there are millions who are not just watching, they're holding space for you to figure yourself out in real time, cheering when you sing, yes, but also when you apologize, also when you rest, also when you admit you don't know, also when you say, I need a minute. Fame can isolate you if you let it, because cameras can become mirrors and mirrors can become walls. But people can be doors if you keep your heart open. That's what I felt the day my mom asked that question. A door closing in my chest, and then another door creaking open inside me that said, slow down, listen, try to hear what sits underneath the words. Underneath, there was a mother who has watched me give myself to stages and studios and screens since I was a teenager. A woman who has seen the joyful cost and the quiet cost, the birthdays missed, the way a schedule can eat a week and leave you with only a few crumbs of time to share with the people you love. She wasn't trying to break us, she was trying to protect what she helped build. Still, I was angry. I was angry because the person I love has a name, a story, a soul. Not just a role in my life. She deserves a warm seat at the table, not an exam at the door. But the person I love surprised me. She took a breath, met my mom's eyes with gentleness, and said something I didn't expect. I don't want to take him from the world that raised him. I want to walk him home from it. I want to learn how to keep the house softly lit so when he returns from all those bright places, he has somewhere to rest his eyes. I felt the wind change. My mom's face softened. Mine did too. Because this is what love looks like when you strip away the performance. Not ownership, not rescue, not control. Love is stewardship. Love is present. Love is the daily practice of showing up when it's not convenient, when the cameras are gone, when the song is finished and the room is messy and the only rhythm left is two people breathing. I think about the early days a lot, our dorm rooms, the ramen that tasted like victory on nights. We thought we had nothing left. The injuries that made me feel older than my age, the laughter that made me feel young again in 1 second. I remember promises we made quietly, promises I make to myself now as I prepare for a life that will ask me for a new kind of courage. Not the courage to jump higher, but the courage to stay. The courage to turn my phone face down. The courage to say no to things that make me look big but make my soul feel small. The courage to sit with my mom and ask her to tell me what she's really afraid of. She told me she fears the kind of loneliness that can sneak into a house even when it's full of gifts and flowers and photos. The kind that comes from loving someone who is loved by everyone. She worries about the shadow of all this. The schedules, the rumors, the pressure, the distance, the danger of being treated like a product when you are trying to remain a person. I listened. I told her I knew that shadow too. I told her I was learning to carry a candle inside me that doesn't blow out when the doors open and the flash hits my face. The one I love helps me carry it. My brothers help me carry it. Army helps me carry it. But here is a truth I had to swallow. No one can carry it for me. I have to choose every day to be the kind of man who returns home with light still in his eyes. That choice is how love stays alive. People ask what kind of relationship we have, and I'm careful with that answer because the most precious things don't always want to be held up to the sun for inspection. I can say this. We talk about real things. We talk about money and time and privacy and health. We talk about what it means to be with someone who is recognized in an airport when all she wanted was coffee and quiet. We talk about the weight of a rumor and how to keep it from bending your spine. We talk about family. We talk about how to love my mom well and how to be honest when honesty stings, how to apologize without turning it into a performance, how to forgive quickly and mean it. We talk about the future in soft colors because the exact date is unknown and that's okay. We're not racing. We're building. We keep our hands busy with simple acts that make a life sturdy. Cooking a late meal, leaving notes, texting when we arrive safe, choosing rest even when there is always another thing to do, praying quietly even when the prayer is only a breath that says thank you for this day, for this person, for this chance to try again. People say music is about perfection, but I think music is about truth that knows how to keep going. That's what I want in love. Not a flawless melody, but a living one. And still, I was angry that day. Angry that the person I love had to prove she understood a life that sometimes even I struggle to understand. I wanted to defend her, to shield her, to tell my mom that love is not an entrance exam. But the deeper truth is that love is an everyday practice, and that question, as much as it hurt, became a mirror for me. It asked me, are you ready to be loved, not just by the crowd, but by a person who will tell you the truth in your own kitchen when your pride is louder than your wisdom? Are you ready to keep your promises when the road gets long and the applause gets quiet? Are you ready to be kind when you are tired and to listen when you are sure you are right? Are you ready to be a son and a companion at the same time, not choosing one identity to escape the work of the other? I took a walk after that conversation, hoodie up, mask on, air cold enough to make my breath visible, step steady like a metronome. Seoul at night can feel like an ocean of lights. And sometimes I think about how many stories are happening in those windows, how many choices are being made in real time that no one will ever post about. I thought about the teenagers who practice until dawn, the parents who worry, the friends who misunderstand and then come back and try again. I thought about army in countries I haven't visited yet, people who have held me up without ever touching me, who have learned my rhythms and forgave my stumbles and laughed with me when joy was simple and pure. I thought about the brothers who became my map when I couldn't find the road alone. And I asked myself the question underneath my mom's question. Can you be the kind of man whose life is not just a headline, but a home? That's what I want. A home where my mom can sit and talk without fear. A home where the person I love can breathe without feeling like she has to earn her place at the table every day. A home where my brothers can visit and kick their shoes off and we can argue about food and music and then hug it out like we always do. A home where army is always welcome in spirit, where there's a corner of the living room that belongs to every message, every banner, every voice that said, keep going. I'm still learning. I'm still planning. I don't know the date. I just know the direction. I know that love later in life doesn't mean you're late to love. It means you bring more awareness to it, more gratitude, more respect for the small routines that make the big vows real. I know that being angry at my mom didn't make me a bad son. It made me a human one. What mattered was what I did next. I called her the next day. I told her I loved her. I told her I heard her worry. I told her I want her to feel safe with the woman I love, not suspicious. I told her that questions can protect, but they can also bruise, and that we have to hold both truths with care. She told me she would try. She told me she trusts me. She told me she is proud. The woman I love texted me after a simple message that said, tell her I'm staying. Not staying as in staying home while I go out into the world, but staying as in staying committed to the work of love, the daily practice, the quiet courage, the long game. I smiled at my screen for a long time. I looked up and the ceiling light looked softer than usual. Maybe nothing had changed outside, but everything felt different inside. That's what happens when love is real. The room stays the same, but you breathe easier inside it. This is where I am. I'm walking into the biggest promise of my life with open eyes and steady hands. I'm not promising perfection. I'm promising practice. I'm promising to keep choosing kindness when it's not convenient, honesty when it's awkward, forgiveness before it calcifies into distance. I'm promising to remember the kid who stared at a future he couldn't imagine and still showed up to the studio, the young man who trusted 6 voices to become a compass, the artist who learned that applause is a wave you ride, but meaning is the ocean you swim. I'm promising to be the kind of man who can carry light home and share it. If you're listening from far away, from a place where the night is long or the morning is loud, know this. You don't need a perfect moment to start practicing the love you want to live. You only need the next small choice. I'm making mine. And to my mom, I love you. To the woman I love, thank you for answering a hard question with a soft strength. To my brothers, thank you for staying beside me when the road bent. To Army, you are the chorus in my chest when the room goes silent. We haven't set the date, we're still learning. But the promise is already here, and I'm going to protect it with everything I am becoming. I woke up the next morning before sunrise, the kind of hour when the sky still looks undecided about whether it wants to be night or day, and everything is quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of my own breathing. It's funny how peace can make you more aware of what's unresolved inside you. I sat at the edge of my bed, scrolling through messages I hadn't replied to, watching the blue light hit the wall. There were texts from the members, from staff, from Army posts that had somehow found their way into my mentions. Everyone seemed to be moving forward while I was sitting still, replaying a conversation between my mom and the woman I love, like a song I couldn't get out of my head. I kept thinking about that moment, her calm voice, my mom's worried eyes, the silence that followed. You know how some silences echo louder than arguments? That was one of them. I realized something as I sat there. I wasn't just angry because my mom had asked the question. I was angry because part of me understood why she asked it. And when understanding arrives in the same space as pride, it doesn't soothe you, it humbles you, and humility can sting if you're not ready for it. I had spent so many years mastering control. Control of breath, of movement, of tone, of timing. But love, real love, doesn't fit inside control. It spills, it tests, it teaches. That morning, I promised myself I wouldn't run from that lesson. I brewed coffee, the bitter kind I like when I need to think, and called Namjoon. He always answers with that deep, half-awake voice that sounds like wisdom just rolled out of bed. He listened quietly as I told him everything, what my mom said, how I reacted, how I felt afterward. When I finished, he didn't give me a lecture. He just said, "You're learning how to be two things at once, a son and a man. That balance isn't taught, it's practiced." I could hear the smile in his voice, that calm steadiness that has guided all of us more times than I can count. After we hung up, I sat with his words, practice. That's what it's always been, hasn't it? From the first dance rehearsal in a tiny studio to the biggest stages in the world, everything has been practice. And maybe that's what love is too. Daily practice, quiet repetition, grace and imperfection. I called my mom next. She sounded cautious, like she didn't know if I was still upset. I told her I wasn't calling to argue. I told her I just wanted her to know that I love her and that I understand she only wants me to be happy. There was a pause. Then she sighed, a sound full of years and care and the kind of love that doesn't always know how to speak gently. "I know she's a good person," my mom said. "I just need to know that she knows what this life costs." I told her she does. I told her she's seen me at my worst. The nights when exhaustion made me silent. The mornings when I questioned everything. The parts of fame that no one would envy. I told her she still stayed. My mom grew quiet again and then said, "Then I'll trust your heart." It wasn't an apology, but it was a bridge. And sometimes a bridge is all you need to cross back into love. Later that day, I met Jimin at the studio. He always knows when something's heavy on my mind, and he never asks directly. He just lets the conversation find its way there. We started talking about music, about the kind of songs that carry truth even when they're simple. Then he looked at me and said, "You've been quieter than usual. What's up?" I told him. I told him how angry I'd been, how much I hated that my mom's words still echoed in my chest. He nodded slowly, then said something I'll never forget. "You can't protect everyone from your mother's love. It's wild. Like water, it finds its own way through the cracks. Let it. It's still love." That hit me harder than I expected, because he was right. My mom's question came from a place of deep love and deep fear. And maybe those two things will always travel together when it comes to family. Jimin has a way of saying things that sound soft but land like truth bombs. We ended up staying there for hours, just talking about family, about the different shapes love takes, about how sometimes the people who raise us still see us as children no matter how grown we become. "Maybe that's the point," he said. "They need to see some part of us as kids so they can still believe they did their job." I smiled at that. We laughed about how no matter how old we get, moms will always tell us to eat more vegetables or wear warmer clothes. It's their way of staying needed. But deep down, I knew the conversation with my mom had shifted something in me. I wasn't just her son anymore. I was someone's future partner, someone's soon-to-be husband. That thought scared me and grounded me at the same time. Later that night, I texted her, the woman I love, and told her I was sorry if that moment had made her uncomfortable. She replied almost instantly, "Your mom is amazing. She just loves you differently than I do." I stared at the message for a long time. Love differently. That phrase stuck with me. It reminded me of how every important person in my life has taught me a different kind of love. Namjoon with patience, Jin with laughter, Yoongi with truth, Hosik with hope, Jimin with empathy, Taehyung with freedom, Army with faith, my mom with endurance. Love isn't one lesson, it's a whole curriculum. I'm still in class. The next week, we had a day off, a rare one. I went home, not to my apartment, but to my childhood house. The walls still carried the faint smell of the same detergent my mom used when I was a kid. My old room was smaller than I remembered. The posters were gone, replaced by family photos. On the shelf was a framed picture of me and my dad taken on a fishing trip before everything got too busy. I stared at it for a long time. My dad doesn't talk much about feelings. He's the quiet type who believes love is shown, not said. But when I told him about my plans about wanting to marry someday, he just nodded and said, "Then build something that lasts." I asked him what he meant, and he said, "Make sure it's bigger than both of you, but small enough to hold in your hands." I didn't understand it then. I think I'm starting to now. Relationships aren't about grand gestures. They're about the daily work of holding space for each other's growth. I went to the kitchen where my mom was cooking. She looked up, surprised but happy, and handed me a knife to help her chop vegetables. It felt good, normal. We didn't talk about that question again. We didn't need to. Sometimes love is silent work. The kind you do shoulder to shoulder while the smell of garlic fills the air. After dinner, she asked if I was tired. I said no. We sat in the living room, the TV murmuring softly in the background, and she said, "You look like your father when you're thinking." I laughed. "Is that good?" She smiled. "It means you're serious about something." I told her I was. I told her I wanted to be ready not just for a wedding, but for a marriage. For a life built on respect, patience, and partnership. She nodded, her eyes softening. "Then take your time," she said. "Don't rush. The right love won't vanish if you move slowly." That night, lying in my old bed, I realized how rare it is to have people who let you grow in front of them. Growth isn't always graceful. It's awkward, messy, uncertain, but the people who stay through that are the ones who deserve to see the finished song. The next morning, I met Taehyung for coffee. He was wearing something only he could pull off: wide pants, loose shirt, sunglasses indoors. He grinned as soon as he saw me. "You look like a man with a secret," he said. I told him I was more like a man with a question. I asked him what he thought about marriage. He leaned back thinking. "I think love is like jazz," he said. "You can't plan it perfectly. You just need to trust your rhythm and listen." That made me laugh, but it also made sense. Love isn't choreography, it's improvisation. You learn each other's timing by paying attention, by being present. We spent the rest of the day walking around, talking about everything and nothing. He told me to stop overthinking. "If you love her, just keep showing up," he said. That's all anyone really wants. That stuck with me. Showing up, that's what Army does for us every day. They show up through every era, every challenge, every silence. They don't just love the music, they love the growth. And I want to love like that, steady, loyal, evolving. A few days later, I got a call from Yoongijungkook. His timing is always mysterious, like he has a radar for when I need grounding. He said, "I heard about the conversation with your mom." I asked how he knew. He just laughed softly. "News travels faster than beats," he said. Then he got serious. "Don't let guilt mix with love too much. It makes it heavy. Keep them separate so they can both breathe." I didn't fully understand it at first, but over time, I saw what he meant. Guilt tries to rewrite love into something you owe. Real love is something you offer freely. I'm still learning that balance. One night, during rehearsal, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror mid-dance, sweat dripping, heart pounding, and I saw not just the artist, but the son, the partner, the man in progress. The mirror didn't scare me anymore. It reminded me that all these roles are one person, one journey. Sometimes Army sends me letters that talk about their own families, their parents, their fears about growing up, about feeling misunderstood. I read those and see pieces of myself in them. That's why I wanted to share this story, Because behind every stage light, there's a family trying to understand how to let go and still love. Behind every artist, a mother learning how to trust the world with her child. I think about that every time I sing. Music connects the parts of us that words can't. When my mom asked that question, she wasn't challenging my love. She was reminding me of my roots. She wanted to know that I wouldn't lose myself, that I'd stay grounded, that I'd still come home. And maybe I needed that reminder. 'Cause the higher you fly, the more deliberate your landings have to be. I don't know when I'll get married. I don't have a date circled on a calendar. What I have is a direction, a purpose, and a person who makes me want to keep practicing the kind of love that lasts longer than applause. Every time I think about the future, I picture a home filled with laughter, with music playing softly in the background, maybe some kids running around, maybe just quiet mornings with coffee and sunlight. I picture my mom visiting, sitting at the kitchen table, smiling at the woman she once tested, seeing not a threat, but an ally. I picture myself looking at her and realizing all that anger had turned into gratitude. Because love, at its deepest, is forgiveness repeated over time. Forgiving others, forgiving yourself, forgiving the parts of life that don't go the way you planned. That's where peace lives. I'm trying to build from that place now. To everyone listening, wherever you are, maybe you've had your own moment like this, someone you love saying something that hurt, not because they wanted to, but because they were scared. I hope you can hear the love underneath the fear. I hope you can stay long enough for the silence to turn back into understanding. That's what happened to me. That's how my anger became something else, something softer, wiser. It didn't happen overnight. It happened through small choices, quiet talks, and the courage to keep showing up. That's the kind of man I'm becoming. And if you're listening to this, maybe it's the kind of love you're learning to build too. We can practice together. The day after I spoke with my mom and felt that quiet peace settle between us, I woke up with a strange lightness in my chest, like something heavy had been released, but still left a faint mark behind. You know how a storm ends and the air still smells like rain even though the sky is clear? That's what it felt like. I looked out the window and Seoul was still half asleep. The streets washed clean, the sky soft and pale. I sat there for a while, drinking water instead of coffee for once. Because I didn't want to rush my thoughts. I just wanted to feel them. I thought about how anger can become tenderness if you let it finish its course, instead of cutting it off halfway. It's strange, no one teaches you that emotional honesty is like breathing through pain during training. They teach you how to endure, not how to release. But I think I'm learning. Later that day, I went to the studio again. Not to record, just to sit. There's something sacred about an empty studio, the quiet hum of cables, the faint echo of a bass line that's still living in the walls. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence until it felt like a song. Sometimes when I'm there alone, I hear fragments of the past, laughter, mistakes, arguments, all layered together like old tracks in a mix. And then, in between all that noise, I hear truth. Truth never shouts, it whispers. The whisper that day told me to keep growing slower, not faster. I think that's one of the hardest things to do when you live in a world built on momentum. Every headline says go bigger, every algorithm says keep moving, every expectation says don't stop. But love doesn't work like that. It asks for stillness, for the courage to pause long enough to hear what's underneath. I texted Kyung that I was in the studio, and within 20 minutes, he walked in wearing that huge grin of his, carrying 2 ice drinks like he knew exactly what I needed. He said, "Bro, the energy feels heavy in here. Let's fix that." We talked about nothing for an hour, shoes, food, random memories. But then he looked at me, serious for a second, and said, "You know, your mom's question means she trusts that girl enough to test her. If she didn't care, she'd say nothing." It hit me again how each of the members sees love through a different lens. Hoseok sees it as celebration. as motion, as light that keeps moving through dark rooms until it finds something to illuminate. I realize how lucky I am to have these different mirrors around me, each reflecting a part of me I might have missed. He started playing a beat on his phone, nodding his head, and we ended up jamming freestyle for half an hour. Laughter filled the studio, and the heaviness lifted. That's his gift, turning gravity into rhythm. After he left, I stayed behind and wrote a few lines in my notebook. Words that might never become lyrics, but needed to exist somewhere. Love is the rehearsal for forever, not the performance. I didn't know why that line came to me, but it felt right. A week later, we had a group dinner. All 7 of us. It's rare now with everyone on different paths, but when we do sit down together, it feels like time folds back into something simple. We ate too much, laughed too loud, talked over each other. Jaehyung was the loudest, of course, teasing everyone like no time had passed. At one point, he raised his glass and said, "To the next chapters, may we all keep surprising ourselves." There was warmth in that moment I can't describe. It's like no matter how far we go, this circle remains. After dinner, we lingered outside, the air cold enough to make our breath visible. RM wrapped his scarf tighter and said, "We're all changing, huh?" And Taehyung said, "That's what seasons do." I looked at them, these men who had become family, and realized that every version of me they've seen has been real, even the confused, flawed, uncertain ones. That's a rare kind of love, the one that survives growth. When I got home, I called her. The woman who's been quietly walking beside me through all this noise. She picked up, her voice soft. "How was dinner?" she asked. "Good," I said. "Loud, messy, perfect." She laughed. "Sounds like family." "Yeah," I said. "It is." There was a pause, the comfortable kind that exists only between people who trust each other's silence. Then she said, "You sound lighter." I told her I was trying to be. I told her I'd been thinking about what my mom asked and about how she handled it with such grace. She said, "Your mom's protecting what she helped you build. I'd do the same if I were her." And there it was again, that empathy that keeps humbling me. She doesn't fight my world, she tries to understand it. That night we talked about small things. Favorite childhood meals, music we loved as teenagers, random what-ifs about the future. We didn't talk about marriage or plans. We just talked like two people building a bridge of words across distance. When we hung up, I sat there smiling, realizing how quiet love can be when it's safe. Not every connection needs fireworks. Sometimes it's enough to share warmth through a screen and know the feeling is mutual. The next day, I went for a drive alone. It's something I do when my mind gets crowded. I drove out past the city through the edges of countryside where the buildings thin out and you can actually see the horizon. I rolled the windows down, felt the wind, and started talking to myself. Not in a weird way, just thinking out loud. I asked myself what kind of husband I want to be someday. I didn't have a perfect answer, but words started forming. Patient, honest, gentle, resilient, present. Not flawless, not always calm, just someone who keeps returning even when it's hard. That's the kind of man I want to be. Not only for her, but for the people who've believed in me all these years. At a red light, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the boy I used to be. That's the thing about growing up in front of the world. Everyone sees your milestones, but only you see the quiet transformations that happen in between. I'm grateful for every version of me, even the restless ones, because they all led here. When I got back home, I found a box at my door. It was from Army fan letters collected from around the world. I sat on the floor, opened it, and started reading. Some were short, some were essays, all written with love that felt bigger than distance. One said, "I hope you find someone who looks at you the way you look at music." I stopped there and let the words sink in. I already had. Later that week, I went to visit my dad. He doesn't say much, but that's okay. Sometimes silence says enough. We sat outside, drinking tea. He asked how things were going. I told him about the conversation with my mom, about how I'd been learning to balance everything. He listened, nodded, then said, "You know, your mom worries because she sees herself in you. Same fire, same heart. You both protect with intensity." That made me smile. He looked at me then and said, "A man becomes himself when he learns how to protect without controlling." I thought about that the whole drive home. Protect without controlling, that's love's hardest lesson. I texted my mom later, "Thanks for loving me fiercely. I'm learning from you." She sent back a heart emoji. That was her way of saying she understood. Weeks passed, and life went back to its rhythm, rehearsals, projects, meetings, but something inside me had shifted permanently. I was calmer, more observant. I noticed how people spoke to each other, how kindness looked in small gestures. I found myself praying quietly more often, not for success, but for alignment, that my heart, my actions, and my words would all tell the same story. One night I couldn't sleep, so I wrote again in that same notebook. Love is the art of paying attention. That's what Sarah in that Elon Musk story understood too. Character is built through daily choices. I smiled thinking how lessons travel from one story to another, like echoes across generations. In my own story, the teacher is everyone around me. Sometimes the lesson comes disguised as a question from my mom. Sometimes as a lyric from Yoongi. Sometimes as laughter from Jin. Or silence from RM. Or wild freedom from Taehyung. Or warmth from Hoseo. Or quiet reassurance from Jimin. Or faith from Army. It's all connected. One night, after a long day, I found myself in the kitchen again. The same place where all of this began. The question, the anger, the understanding. I made tea and thought about how full circle moments sneak up on you. The same house, the same walls, but a different heart standing inside them. I whispered to myself, "You're growing." And for once, I believed it. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe marriage, maybe more waiting, maybe surprises, I can't predict. But I do know this. Every day is an opportunity to practice the love I hope to give. To treat people gently even when I'm tired. To keep humility close. To forgive faster. To stay grounded even when the world wants me to float. I think that's what my mom really wanted to know. Not whether my love could survive fame, but whether I could. I want her to see that I can. So I'm taking my time, building something real. And when the day comes, whenever it comes, I'll look back at this moment, this whole journey, and know it was necessary. The anger, the lessons, the growth, all of it. Because sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones that prepare your heart for its next chapter. And this right here feels like the beginning of one. I didn't mean to fall asleep on the couch, but that's where morning found me, phone face down, hoodie half off one shoulder, the city already awake and moving outside my window. There's a specific kind of quiet that happens right before you admit a truth to yourself. It feels like standing backstage, hearing the crowd, but listening for your own breathing. I brewed tea instead of coffee and let the steam rise across the glass. And I told myself the thing I'd been circling around for days. Being angry at my mom wasn't just about her question, it was about the fear that I might not live up to the answer. I've spent years learning to hit the note, nail the turn, hold the center. But love asks for a different kind of discipline. You don't get a clean take, you get a life. I texted J-Hope a photo of the sunrise through my window and he sent back a voice note immediately. Bright, as if he'd been waiting for my message. Walk it off. 10,000 steps. No headphones. Listen to the city. So I did. Soul has a heartbeat you can only hear when you're not trying to lead the rhythm. The baker sliding trays into the oven, the cyclist laughing into the cold. The delivery guy waving at the Ajumma watering plants outside her shop. I let the sound of everyone else's morning loosen the grip of my own thought. Somewhere around the 7th block, the idea I'd been resisting just sat down beside me. Call her and tell her exactly what you're afraid of. not what you're sure about. I've spent a lifetime being sure. Certainty is a costume I know how to wear. But intimacy begins at the seam where certainty gives way to honesty. I didn't call right away. First, I went to the little convenience store by the park and bought those triangle kimbap that taste like childhood. I ate them on a bench and watched a kid teach his dad how to throw a paper plane. The first throws nosedived. The kid giggled and adjusted the fold, and on the fourth try the plane caught the light and sailed. I don't know why that moment got me, but it did. How many things in my life just needed a gentler fold? Back home, I finally dialed. She answered on the second ring, voice soft, like she'd been expecting my hesitation. I didn't rehearse, I just talked. I told her I was worried about failing in slow ways, the missed calls, the distracted dinners, the way ambition can eat weekends and spit out apologies. I told her I didn't want to build a home with hidden drafts where hurt sneaks in, and nobody says anything until the plants will. She listened without interrupting. When I ran out of words, she took a breath and said, I don't need your certainty, I need your attention. It landed like a bell. Attention. The currency of every real relationship I've ever had. The reason rehearsal turns strangers into brothers. The reason army can feel close from oceans away. The reason my mom's single sentence could shake me because it was paying close attention to the thing I wanted to avoid. We talked for an hour about practical things that don't fit into lyrics but hold a life together. Calendars, boundaries, when we'd say yes to public and when we'd protect private, what it means for her to keep her work her own and not become a satellite of mine, how to disagree without turning the room into a courtroom. When we hung up, nothing was solved in the dramatic way, movies promise, but everything was steadier. It felt like putting legs under a table that had always been beautiful but wobbly. In the afternoon, I met Yoongi in the studio that always smells faintly of coffee and old guitar cases. He has a way of seeing what's under the sentence you say. I told him I was tired of being brave only on stage. He spun his chair, looked at me like I'd said the obvious thing we spent a decade avoiding, and replied, then move the bravery. He muted the session. The room went very still, and he added, courage in art is precision. Courage in love is softness. You already know how to be precise. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. He unmuted the track, a fragile piano loop, and I sat there hearing how delicately a melody can hold a room if you don't force it to be loud. I wrote a line in my notes app. Soft is not small. Soft carries. On the way out, I called Jin. He answered with a joke that made me roll my eyes and laugh anyway. I told him I was learning the difference between protecting and controlling. He said, you protect a garden by watering, not by building a roof. It's unfair how he can throw out one line that steals the air from your lungs and then ask what you ate for lunch like he didn't just hand you a thesis. We traded stupid memories until my face hurt, and somewhere in there the heaviness I'd been carrying dissolved into something like gratitude. Laughter is the world's most underrated wisdom. That night, a box of letters arrived another wave from Army. I spilled them onto the floor and sat cross-legged in the middle like a kid at a birthday party. One letter from Brazil said, I'm scared to get married because my parents' marriage was loud and then silent. Another from the Philippines. Please tell your mom that we love her for loving you. We'll love her too. From Poland. You don't have to be perfect to be our hero. Just keep growing honestly. I pressed my palm to the paper like I could touch the person who wrote it. People say fame isolates, but it also connects you to the invisible kindness of strangers who somehow already know the shape of your heart. I called my mom the next morning. We didn't circle the topic. I walked straight into it. I told her that hearing her question turned my pride into a shield, and I hid behind it because it felt safer than admitting I'm still learning. I told her what my dad said about protecting without controlling. I told her what she means to me in plain language, not the polished kind. She listened, and then she told me her real fear, the one beneath the first fear. I don't want to become the person your wife has to forgive for stealing parts of you. It broke something open in me. I reminded her that love is not a thief. It's a return address. That the person I choose won't take me away. She'll walk me home. My mom cried like she hadn't let herself in a long time. We made tea on opposite ends of the call and sipped in silence like we were at the same table. Later, I took a drive with Taehyung. He played old jazz and then some random indie track with a trumpet. So human it felt like it was breathing. We didn't talk about big things at first. We just existed in the same smallness passing storefronts, arguing about which donut is superior, laughing at a dog in sunglasses. Then, at a red light, he said, "People think romance is fireworks. I think it's the way someone saves you the last bite without announcing it." I told him that maybe the most romantic thing I've experienced lately is a shared calendar. He snorted and then nodded. "It means you're thinking together," he said. Thinking together, how simple, how rare. Back at the gym later, I let the rhythm of jump rope count time while my mind did its own reps. The body tells the truth the voice can't say. My calves burned, my lungs pulled in cold air, and the last of the anger finally left my skin in sweat. When I finished, I sat on the floor and stared at the ceiling until my heartbeat slowed and the fluorescent lights stopped buzzing like thoughts. I whispered a small prayer, not for an easy road, but for a soft heart. For the courage to slow down enough to notice when someone I love needs my hand, not my opinion. Night came with rain, the kind that turns reflections into watercolor. I walked to the tiny restaurant near my place where the owner knows to bring extra kimchi without asking. The TV in the corner showed a travel show with the volume low. In the booth behind me, two friends were debating whether people change or just reveal themselves. I watched the door, waiting. When she arrived, she shook the rain from her umbrella and smiled in that tired way that says it was a day. We ate quietly for a while and then I told her about the letters. I told her about the one that said, "We'll love your mom too." She laughed and put her chopsticks down like she wanted to clap. "Your people are good," she said. "They are," I answered, and I meant army, the members, my family, strangers who keep proving they're not strangers. We spoke about money because pretending it doesn't matter makes it matter more. We spoke about time because schedules can become thieves if you let them. We spoke about rumor because truth travels slower but further. We decided we'd guard a few sacred things. Sunday mornings, long walks without phones, the habit of telling the whole truth before sleep, even if it's awkward or inconvenient. We made one promise we could keep right away. No heroics in conflict. No speeches, no exits. If you need space, say space. If you need closeness, say so. It felt humble and huge at the same time. On my way home, I called RM. He's always reading, and he said, "Real vows are made out of verbs." I asked him to repeat it, and he laughed. Vows aren't lines you frame. They're habits you practice. People don't fall out of love. They fall out of practice. I went quiet, then said thank you like a student collecting a new instrument. I've never wanted perfection from life. What I've wanted is a rhythm I can carry when the stage is gone and the lights are off and the room is just the sound of dishes in a sink and a voice. I love saying, "Are you coming to bed?" Back at my place, I took out the old notebook again. On a fresh page I wrote, "Attention over certainty, soft over spectacle, practice over promise." I slipped the notebook into the drawer like planting a seed in dirt I'd finally learned to water. I texted my mom good night. She sent a photo of the tea she was drinking and a single word, rest. I texted the members a grateful nonsense paragraph about donuts and jazz and calendars and how much I love them for standing in every version of my life without demanding a different one. The read receipts lit up like a small constellation. Before I slept, I stood by the window and looked at the city's late-hour brightness. Somewhere out there, another mother was asking a hard question. Somewhere, a son was learning to hear the heart under the guard. Somewhere, two people were choosing verbs over speeches. And somewhere, army were writing letters they'd never know arrived exactly on time. I pressed my palm to the glass and let the cool remind me I'm alive in the middle of a becoming I can feel but can't rush. I haven't set a date. I don't have a venue or a suit picked out or a song chosen for a first dance. What I have is a circle of people who keep handing me different kinds of courage, and a woman who doesn't need me to be a legend, just a man who pays attention. I turned off the lights and the apartment fell into that good darkness where nothing performs. In the quiet I could hear my own breath, steady as a metronome. I thought about the paper plane in the park catching air on the fourth try. I thought about the garden that needs water, not a roof. I thought about moving bravery from the stage into the kitchen, the hallway, the doorway where we leave our shoes side by side. I thought about my mom, whose love can sound like thunder but always ends in rain, and how rain grows things we forgot we planted. I closed my eyes and said one more small prayer. Let me be soft enough to carry. Then I slept, not perfectly, but deeply enough to dream of a home lit warm from the inside, a table with room for everyone who taught me how to stay. I woke before the alarm and watched the pale edge of morning slide across the ceiling like a slow wave. And somewhere between the soft buzz of the heater and the first sparrows outside, I realized the anger I'd been carrying had thinned into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, more like a readiness to learn. And that scared me because learning means admitting you didn't know. Admitting you were protecting yourself with a sharper tone instead of a softer truth. So I lay there and pictured the three of us at the same table again, my mother, the woman I love. And me and I promised myself I would bring a different temperature to the room. Not colder, not hotter, just kinder. Because kindness is the climate where difficult sentences can breathe. I texted a morning hello to everyone RM with his early book, Yoongi with his late night loop, Jin who pretends not to wake up before noon but always replies first, Hobie already stretching sunshine into the day, Jimin sending a sleepy emoji that somehow looked exactly like his face, Taehyung attaching a photo of a dog in a sweater that made no sense and perfect sense at the same time, and then I put my phone down and made the kind of breakfast you make when you want to steady yourself without ceremony, rice and eggs and something green. Ate slowly, washed the dishes immediately because I didn't want to leave small messes to harden into bigger ones. And I thought about how that's true for feelings too, how unspoken things crust over the edges of a life if you don't rinse them while they're fresh. Later I went to a practice room not to rehearse, but to sit in a chair where I've failed 1,000 times and still kept going because I needed that memory in my body. The way repetition makes room for grace, the way stubbornness turns into devotion when you keep showing up for the right reasons. And I whispered a quiet prayer that sounded more like thank you than help me, because gratitude is a rope you can grab even when you don't know the route. In the afternoon, I met Jimin for a short walk. No agenda, just steps. And he told me a story about a time he said something too sharp to someone he loved and how the apology didn't fix the moment. It fixed the pattern, and I carried that sentence like a stone with warm edges because I want to fix patterns, not just moments. I want to be the kind of man who notices where hurt sneaks in under the door and puts a rug there, not a lock. We stopped for tea and he said, without drama, "Your mom loves you by checking the exits." And I laughed a little because it was true. She scans every room for the ways a heart can escape itself. And I realized I inherited that, the scanning, the plan making, the urge to fortify when what I need is to invite. And when we hugged goodbye, I felt lighter. Like I'd set down a bag I wasn't meant to carry alone. On the drive home, a rumor popped up on my phone, one of those careless little fires the internet likes to start when it's bored. And for a second, I felt that old surge of protectiveness, that urge to control, to slam a statement down and watch the flames die. But instead, I pulled over, texted her, told her I saw it, told her I'm here, asked what she needed, and she wrote back, "Nothing right now, just you." And I smiled in the driver's seat at how ordinary salvation can feel, how often the heroic answer is attention. So I turned off notifications and drove in silence and let the city wash over me like a low faithful tide. When I reached home, my mom had left a covered dish with a note that only said, "Eat while warm." And I stood there with the food in my hands and realized apology had already arrived in her language. Not as a speech, but as soup, which is how mother says, "I'm sorry and I'm still your home" in the same ladle. So I set the table for one and said grace for three. For the woman who taught me endurance, for the woman teaching me gentleness, for the man trying to stitch both together without tearing anything. That night I wrote in my notebook the vows. I'm not ready to speak publicly, but need to practice privately. I will not make work the reason I forget your eyes. I will not use exhaustion as a shield against tenderness. I will not hide behind explanations when a simple "I'm sorry" would open the door. I will give you the first quiet of my day and the last light of my evening. I will remember that love is not a mural, but a garden, and weeds are honest invitations to kneel. I will be a son who visits, and a partner who returns, and an artist who tells the truth, even when the truth is that I need help. The next morning, Hobie dragged me to the river because he said the sky had written something we needed to read. And he was right. The water was a mirror big enough to show you without judgment, and we jogged until our chest burned and then laughed for no reason. And I told him about the rumor and the soup and the private vows, and he nodded like a proud older brother and said, "Keep moving the bravery." And I promised I would, not just on stage, but in the kitchen, in the apology, in the space between a question and an answer. Later, I called Taehyung and asked him to help me choose a small gift from my mom that says, "I see you changing and I'm changing too." And he said, "Get something for her hands." And that felt perfect. So I bought a hand cream that smells like clean rain and wrote a note that said, "For all the doors you opened and the pots you held and the blankets you tucked, thank you." And when I gave it to her, she laughed and cried at the same time, the way only moms can. Then told me to sit and slice fruit with the same precision she once used to slice my fear into manageable pieces. And she asked about the woman I love with curiosity instead of caution. And I noticed the air didn't tighten. It softened. And I realized rooms remember. And we were teaching this one a new way to hold us. In the studio that evening, Yoongi played me a piano line, so bare it could have been a prayer, and I sang nonsense vowels over it until the vowels sounded like a promise, and he said, "There," and I knew what he meant. Not the pitch, the honesty, because music knows when you're pretending, and I don't want to pretend anymore. Not in songs, not at the table, not in the quiet with someone who chooses me when the noise is gone. On my way out, I called RM and told him I'd written vows to practice, not to post. And he said, "Habits are vows in disguise." And I laughed, but wrote it down because one day I'll forget and need to remember. And I asked him how he knew what to keep private, what to share. And he said, "Does sharing serve the love or the performance?" And I sat in my parked car with that question glowing on the screen of my mind like a missed call. You finally answer, because I don't want to confuse the audience with intimacy. I want to give the crowd the song and give my person the silence after the uninstagrammable ordinary where a life actually lives. When night came, I met her for a walk under lamps that made everything look like a memory in advance, and we held hands the way people do when they're practicing the future in small steps, and we talked logistics again, boring, beautiful logistics, the kind that keep cracks from saying hello. Who calls who when the day gets hard, which family traditions we adopt, which ones we retire with respect, when to keep our phones in a different room, how to celebrate a Tuesday for no reason, where to volunteer together so our love doesn't fold into itself like a closed fist. And as she spoke, I saw a home rise between us made of verbs, not decor, and I wanted to move in immediately, even if the roof wasn't finished. A drizzle started and she tucked under my arm and said, "You're quieter." And I told her I was listening to the part of me that isn't trying to win, only to keep. And we stopped at a crosswalk and watched the red man blink into the walking man, and I thought how. Most of life is that tiny shift waiting, turning into moving without fanfare. When I got back to my place, I opened the box of letters I hadn't finished and found one from a teenager in India who wrote, "I'm angry at my mom because she asked me if my dream is practical, but I think she was just asking if she can still hold my hand." And I sat there with that sentence in my lap and felt the whole planet exhale through a 14-year-old who already knew something I'm still learning. And I wrote back in my mind, "Yes, let her hold your hand while you build the bridge." And in that moment, I forgave my mother again and forgave myself for taking so long before sleep. I called my dad and told him I'm trying to be a man who protects without controlling. And he said, "Then be the first to apologize and the last to stop trying." And it sounded simple in the way mountains look simple from far away. And I promised to climb anyway. The days after that didn't glitter or shout, they stacked. And I kept choosing small things that felt like tiny foundations. I cooked a meal and didn't photograph it. I stretched for 5 more minutes after I wanted to stop. I answered a text with a call. I asked a question and waited for the full answer instead of rushing to the point. I told my mom where I was going and when I'd be back, not because she asked, but because I wanted her to rest. I sent a song draft to the members without asking for praise, just asking for ears, and the replies came like constellations. Jin's joke, Hobie's exclamation marks, Yoongi's 2 honest words, RM's paragraph that could be a preface, Taehyung's unexpected emoji that somehow meant perfect, jimin sing it like you're not scared anymore. And I realized again that love shows up as feedback too, as someone believing you can stretch a note without breaking. On the weekend, I took my mom and her to the same small restaurant with a travel show on mute and the ajushi, who knows, I like extra kimchi. And I watched them speak the first language of women who care about the same person, schedules and sleep and superstition and recipes and the weather in my chest. And I said almost nothing because it felt holy. The passing of a lantern without drama, and when we left, my mom took her hand for a second longer than necessary. And I pretended to check my phone so I wouldn't cry in public. And on the ride home, she rested her head on my shoulder and said, "Your mom has brave eyes." And I said, "So do you." And for a few blocks, we didn't need music because the quiet was loud enough. That night, I stood at the window again and the city glittered like a promise I don't have to chase anymore. And I whispered to the glass, to God, to the part of me that still wants to sprint, that I'm choosing a slower victory now. The kind you measure in how gently you close a door, how carefully you place a bowl in the sink, how quickly you say I was wrong, how often you laugh on ordinary streets, how ready you are to hear a hard question and answer without turning into an argument. And I knew then that the anger that once made my hands go still had taught me where my real strength begins, not in the volume of my defense, but in the warmth of my return. And as I turned off the lights, I felt the house learn my new rhythm, a softer metronome, steady, patient, counting me into a life I'm finally brave enough to practice. I didn't plan for the day to turn itself into a lesson, but that's how the best ones arrive. Quiet, ordinary, wearing comfortable shoes. So I woke to a sky the color of a calm mind and decided to keep the promise we made about serving together, not because cameras would catch it, but because service puts air back in rooms that fame makes small. And we went to a community kitchen where the hairnets never fit, right? And the onions make everyone honest. And I watched her wash her hands like a ritual and greet strangers like neighbors. And I remembered why I keep choosing this love. It doesn't ask me to perform goodness. It asks me to practice it. An older man told me it was his birthday, but he didn't want cake. He wanted conversation. So I sat with him between tray refills and he asked me how it feels to be loved by millions. And I said, "It feels like holding a lantern others lit first." And he laughed and said, "Then keep the glass clean." And that sentence followed me all day because sometimes wisdom wears an apron. After the shift, we stepped into sunlight that looked like forgiveness, and the wind tried to steal her hair, and then like clockwork, the long lens showed up across the street, and I felt the old reflex rise, protect, control. declare, but I remembered what I promised myself in the kitchen of my chest. Move the bravery. So I took her hand, breathed once, and said, we're okay. And we were, because we walked past the camera without letting it decide our mood. And later, in the car, she said, thank you for not turning that moment into an enemy. And I realized enemies are often just moments we feed with fear. Back home, my mom had left a small bag on my door. No note this time. Just a thermos still warm. And when I poured it, the soup smelled like childhood and apology and endurance. And the steam wrote a message on the window that I couldn't read but felt. So I texted her a photo and she sent back 3 hearts and a spoon emoji. Which is how she says, I love you now that we've learned to shorten speeches into kindness. In the afternoon, Hobie kidnapped me to watch kids at a dance class. He sometimes drops in on, and I stood at the back as they tried to nail a step that demanded more coordination than their joy was currently willing to give. And a boy tripped and a girl laughed and then helped him up, and the music didn't judge anybody. It just kept offering another measure. And I thought, that's what I want for my house someday. A soundtrack that says, try again.